joining me in the studio here is Research Director for the Centre for Migration Control, Rob Bates. Rob, welcome to studio, of course. 26,000 people arriving here illegally by small boat. What's your forecast for this calendar year?
I think we're now at the point that this is far exceeding even the worst years that we saw in 22 and 23. We're about 40% up when it comes to channel crossings on last year. We are probably going to see 50,000 people come across the English Channel this year. 50,000 people arriving this calendar year.
I
mean, this isn't just my projections. These are kind of actual statisticians and modellers have put this forecast in. And when you look at the number of good days for crossing and you look at the fact that actually when there's a growing illegal migrant population in the country, that has a compounding effect of more people looking to make that crossing as well. So 50,000 probably feels about where we will actually end up. And then you look at what the government are actually trying to introduce in terms of a scheme with France, one in, one out, that probably by the end of this year will, in the best case scenario, see 800 people returned to France. You realise that actually their plan would see 2% of those that are probably going to come across this year removed. And you realise just the scale of this problem and the meagre offerings that the Labour government are putting forward to try and address it.
One in, one out policy. I was there at the summit when it was announced in Northwood by the Prime Minister and the French President Emmanuel Macron. That, of course, is a trial. It could be expanded. I mean, it could be more than 700, but it's a very small number at the moment. And it is time limited. It runs out in June next year. But again, it could be expanded. So we're at the very early stages of what could be a successful policy.
Well, it could be successful in that the hope is that it would eventually stop the small boats. But we need to ask ourselves whether actually having a scheme where we end up with the same number of asylum seekers, they're just at different stages of being processed through the system, is something that the British public would actually tolerate at this point. We've seen an asylum system that has exploded in terms of the cost and in terms of the social unease it's created as a result. Since 2019, the budget has gone up nearly tenfold. So we need to realise that actually the British public are more concerned about the cost of this. And if we're bringing in individuals who've had their asylum claims processed and accepted, these are then individuals who are now our responsibility to look after and, when needed, to provide welfare and housing and things like that, without any spectre of them being removed from the country. So this actually could cause us to incur longer-term costs that are perhaps hidden in the welfare bill and hidden beyond sort of the headline asylum budget exploding. But there is a very real risk that this could actually end up harming us economically more so than the current chaos that we've got.
Using the internet without a VPN, a virtual private network, is a bit like taking to the road without car insurance. All it takes is one unlucky moment to cost you a lot of cash. This video's sponsor is Private Internet Access. They are the VPN to help keep you safe. Click the link in the description below to find out why over 30 million people have downloaded PIA to protect themselves online. A virtual private network is an app that hides your IP address and helps keep your data private. When you're browsing the internet at home, you give up a large amount of data to businesses, to shops, and indeed to social media giants too. Hackers have the ability to steal your personal data with ease, including sensitive information such as passwords, keystrokes, and even your personal photos. Private Internet Access helps protect your personal data by encrypting your internet connection to keep your data out of the hands of cyber criminals. And it's not just hackers either to be concerned about. Information can be censored too. When Canada passed their C-18 bill, social media giants decided to ban news content on their platforms. But PIA can protect your ability to consume the news and content you love. Private Internet Access is available for Windows users, Mac OS, Android, Linux, iOS, and you can use one PIA subscription to protect an unlimited amount of devices. And we've got a huge GB News discount for you too. Click the link in this video's description and you'll get a massive 83% off PIA. That's under £2 a month, the price of a coffee, and you'll get an extra 4 months completely free on top. Also, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee too. Visit piavpn.com/GB News to start protecting yourself digitally today.
Is one in, one out enough? We haven't got a deterrent yet, have we? There's talk about offshore processing in the Balkans was one idea talked about by Keir Starmer in Albania. That hasn't happened yet. We remember back, don't we, to a year ago, or just over a year ago now, the Rwanda plan, Tory plans to deport people to Rwanda. That seemed to be working anecdotally. There's reporting from newspapers in northern France saying that people weren't going to come across until Labour won power. In the island of Ireland, some people were going from north to southern Ireland to avoid being being sent to Rwanda. Was it a mistake to drop that on day 2 of this government?
So the virtue of the Rwanda scheme was that it recognised a fundamental part of how migration flows work, which is if you want individuals to not come into your country, you need to remove those pull factors. And the Rwanda scheme did identify that a strong deterrent is necessary if you want to deter people from actually coming to your country. Unfortunately, of course, as we all know very well versed at this point, they didn't take that final step and actually create the legal framework that would enable those deportations to happen on a grand enough scale to really send a message to the tens of thousands.
It was hobbled really by the ECHR, wasn't it?
Well, of course, and there was that moment when migrants were about to be put onto the plane, and there was the late night ECHR ruling, and you then see ministers having been twisted up by it from that point on, and it was ultimately really the Tories' refusal to accept that ECHR membership was the problem that hobbled their plans. And the problem is, of course, from that, Labour have looked to go so far the other way and to talk about smashing the gangs rather than stopping the boats that we're now not even having a strong conversation about a deterrent. And we've ended up with a situation where we have up to 100,000 people now in HMOs and hotels across the country. This is clearly something that's getting out of hand, and there doesn't seem to be anything solid, strong around which a proper framework of deterrence can be built with this Labour Party.
We're seeing protests, of course, across the country outside migrant hotels. Increasingly, people are starting to say that these people arriving here, often it's young men, are committing crimes. Is that overblown? I mean, or is it right that we are talking about that? The police, of course, don't tell us, do they, according to guidance, about the nationality or the immigration status of criminals?
No, I think it's very, very warranted concerns, and you see cases being reported in the Sun and certain hotels in like Bournemouth where there are a large number of charges being brought against individuals being housed in those hotels. Of course, we also know that those individuals coming across on the boats are more likely to be coming from places such as Afghanistan and Eritrea, where the indicative data, Ministry of Justice data, does suggest that they are vastly disproportionately represented in convictions for sexual assault violence.
But you say they're Eritrea and Afghanistan. They are places which may be allowed to grant asylum to those areas.
Well, and this is part of the problem, whether we need to realise that actually the asylum system and where it is at is actually too embracing of individuals from certain countries that might not be coming with our set of values, and are actually probably, if they're coming from a war zone, are more likely to be disposed for socio-economic and cultural reasons to being engaging in these kind of crimes that people are rightly concerned about. There's
talk today from Robert Jenrick. He's the Shadow Justice Secretary. He's concerned about his daughters, and he's presenting a choice, I think, to government, which is quite interesting. He's saying to almost the government, who do you care more about, your children or migrants' human rights?
I think this is increasingly where the conversation is going. When you look at the statistics last year, when a quarter of sexual assaults and a quarter of rape convictions were of foreign nationals, there is a very strong need for us to have a conversation about to what extent our border policy in general is exposing us to risk. Arguably, any individual coming to this country should be not committing a single crime, and if they are doing, they should be deported. And of course, the Justice Secretary has set out some plans to go down that route and to start looking to remove those that are clearly causing harm to society.
We need firmness from government to take on the vested interests which are stopping dealing with this problem. I mean, we're told the government, the Labour government, wants to deal with it. We get to see any fruit of that.
Well, exactly, and the Labour Party's plans here, they can change the law as much as they like, but whether they have the operational capacity and the operational willingness to actually get tackling, get tough, and whether that does involve having a franker conversation with Herman and telling him that perhaps he needs to wind his neck in a bit when it comes to his obsession with human rights.
Lord Herman, the Attorney General. I mean, he's blamed by his critics for this. Is it fair to blame it on one man, or is it a problem in the whole government?
Well, to be honest, I think he's probably more indicative of a kind of malaise and a kind of an ideology that does permeate quite a few ministers.
So who's running the country? Is it lawyers or politicians, perhaps?
Well, I think a lot of people would look at the rulings made by immigration tribunals and realise that actually the way they've been elevated to effectively dictate border policy, we can't remove individuals because their cousin their nephew doesn't like a certain type of chicken.
It goes back to sovereignty, courts.
And this was because that, of course, Brexit wasn't actually properly completed by the Johnson government. They refused to actually address the ECHR issue when they were doing the withdrawal agreement.
Listen, Rob Bates, thank you for joining us today, and to all my guests, of course, on Camilla Tommy Show. It's great to be here. I think Camilla's back next week. We'll watch that closely and enjoy that too. Thanks for watching at home. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly have done. Do